Welcome back to Alabama Gristmill. It's good to be back. I'm your host, Mike Causey, with my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hello.
Good morning, afternoon, day, depending on when you're listening to this.
Right.
We're back, and we're back on a special day today. It's the birthday of the state of Alabama, December 14th. And what was the actual date of the birthday of Alabama?
The actual date was December 14th, 1819. And so next year, we will be 200 years old on this day. We're 199. Right now, Alabama was a territory during 1818, and there's a lot of information about that we'll be talking about this year. So
yeah, there's a lot of events coming up. I know the Alabama Department of Archives and everything. It's got a big website on it. We'll link in the show notes, but it'll also kind of cover all the different events coming up, which we'll be also covering.
Yeah, and if you've got one that you want to bring to everybody's attention, we may have a story to connect with it. So let us know about these events so we might feature it on a special on the podcast.
Right. And with this podcast on the first, on the birthday, we were actually going to talk about the first governor of the state of Alabama and the amazing story he had to how he became the first governor and the trials and tribulation and also a strong woman that was involved and behind all of it. So
right.
It's a good story there. But we want to go ahead and thank all the patrons we have. And we are coming up on our goal of 350 patrons. And we really appreciate the support. And you can, if you want to support what we're doing here with the podcast, the website, and everything, you can always go to our website and become a patron. As little as $1 up to, whatever you want to support us with. We have that with different award levels. I
want to mention something, too. We're asking for your shipping address, because we also are giving away books, autographed books on it. And sometimes, in our life, we get so busy, I send messages out to people that you want a book. And I've had a couple of people that I didn't get a response from. So I don't know if the message is getting in your spam filter or what. But with the shipping address, I can just send it to you. So if you happen to win it, if you're a patron. So I don't want you to miss out on your prizes. So
absolutely.
Put your address in there so we can get to you.
Take a look at that. And, with our goals and everything, we actually are, once we reach our goal, everybody will receive, all the patrons will receive a copy of the ebook that we send out.
Right.
And this ebook, I believe, is, what's the title of that one?
It's The Vinegar of the Four Thieves. It's kind of a fun one to have, good one to have for the winter months ahead, too, because it's got some, old-time recipes and things in there of ways that are still effective in healing people. So, safe things. So
it's kind of like the old wives' tale almanac kind of information that you found out over your research over the years.
Yeah,
so it makes a lot of fun.
It's recipes and health tips that go way back.
And yeah, you definitely,
and they're fun too. Some of them are just funny.
Some are fun, some still work, and some you might know. But it's a fun book to kind of see how things were done in the things that were passed down through generations. All right.
We'll be doing some more footprints books, too, and the next time we set new goals every time. So,
well, we'll go ahead, and with that said, all the business stuff out of the way, we'll go ahead and get into the story about the Alabama's first governor.
This is actually a letter from his brother, John Dandridge Bibb, who was born in Prince Edward County, Virginia, on March 10th, 1788. So you can see how old it is. In fact, the letter was written just a few months before he died on December 1st, 1847. He married on May 6, 1812 to Mary Xenia Oliver, who was born in Peters, Virginia. And he died on the Yazoo River in Carroll County, Mississippi, May 9, 1848. So you can see how old it is. They had 14 children, and only 5 lived to adulthood. The time when he was in Mississippi was really rough on children growing up. You were living in the frontier during those days. He was the brother of the first 2 governors of Alabama, William Wyatt Bibb and Thomas Bibb. And he was one of 8 children, 9 children actually, because one was born after their father died. Their father was Captain William Bibb. He was a native of Virginia, and he held the commission of a captain during the Revolutionary War and later was a member of the legislature of Virginia. Their mother was Sally S. White, born in New Kent County in the same state, and she had a remarkable education for the time because they didn't educate women very much, but she was a kind of a rare breed, and she had a really good education, and she wanted her children to have the same. Captain Bibb and Sally immigrated to the state of Georgia when it was a frontier country and settled on the Savannah River in the future county of Elbert. And that was in Georgia. He died there in 1796. That was not very unusual because it was difficult during those frontier days. Sally was left with 8 children, and she was pregnant with the 9th at the time. So that was kind of difficult. The 9th child was born a few months after Captain Bibb's death, and the Bibb estate was, it had so many debts. They had just recently moved, so I imagine that was part of it. Their oldest child, William Wyatt Bibb, our future governor of Alabama, was only 14 years old. Her education was worthwhile because she was the sole executor of the will and somehow managed to create a comfortable fortune so her children could be educated like she was. And you can imagine that was kind of difficult back then because Georgia was primitive and frontier in nature, so she had to send the children off to school. So she had to pay additional money to get them there. The eldest, William Wyatt Bibb, who was our future governor, was sent to an academy at Washington in Wilkes County, Georgia. Then he went on to college at William and Mary in Virginia. And he returned home and studied medicine in the city of Augusta, then went off to Philadelphia for lectures on medicine and graduated there as an MD at the age of 21, believe it or not. So today, MDs are a little bit older when they graduate. He started practice in Petersburg, Virginia, and he had kind of a problem, though. Back then, you can imagine, the physicians had to go to the homes and travel around in constant, all kind of weather and to treat their patients. And he had a feeble constitution, so he had to give up the practice of medicine because the travel in those days was so difficult. His mother said that he was only 5 feet 10 inches tall and he had a delicate frame. And believe it or not, his weight at best did not exceed 125 pounds. So he was kind of a small man to be traveling around and treating other patients. About the time he started his practice, he married Mary Freeman. She was the daughter of Colonel Holman Freeman, another Revolutionary War soldier, and also a soldier of 1812. So he had a really strong military background, too. And they were from Wilkes County, Georgia. And there's a cute little story that was told by him. And this came from John Dandridge, too. So it's probably pretty accurate that she was one of the most beautiful and accomplished ladies in Georgia. And they attended school together at Wilkes County when Mary was 8 years old and William was 12. Mary was kind of a pretty girl, and she was full of life and spirit. Somehow she did something wrong and made the headmaster a little upset. And he said was going to use the switch on her to punish her because that was the type of punishment he had in that day. In those days, you usually got hit with a board or something like that. But he was going to use the switch. Anyway, William didn't like seeing Mary punished. And so he stood up and he laid down his book and he stepped up to the teacher and he took hold of the teacher's hand. He's not very strong himself. And he said, "Don't strike her. With me, I'll take it for her." And this is a 14-year-old boy standing up for an 8-year-old. And all the eyes were on the teacher. And he looked at William and he said, "William, you are a noble boy. And for your sake, I will excuse Mary." And then 10 years later, Mary was his wife. She probably was pretty impressed by that action. They had only 4 children, though, a boy and a girl. But the other 2 were twins, and they died in infancy. So only 2 of them grew to adulthood. A day or 2 after he was constitutionally eligible, he was elected to the House of Representatives from Elbert County and served 4 years. So he was pretty popular around the area. He identified with the Republican Party. Most of Georgia was Republican, and he became quite popular in 1806. At the age of 25, he was elected to Congress. And that's kind of young if you think about it. People served at an early age back then because they didn't live very long most of the time. He received the appointment as governor of the Alabama Territory in 1816, just 10 years later, by President Monroe. And previous to that time, Alabama had been a Mississippi Territory. And when Mississippi became a state, Alabama was separated and Alabama became a territory. And it was a short time that it was a territory, though, because it was growing so rapidly. When he became governor of the Alabama Territory, William was still a citizen of Georgia. And at that time, it was not required that he live at the seat of the government, so he stayed there for a little while he was in what was the territory, and he appointed a secretary of the territory, Henry Hitchcock, who happened to be an attorney in the area, and invested his powers into him while he was away. The seat of the territorial government was at the town of St. Stephen's, which was kind of close to the Mississippi line on the Tombigbee River. The governor usually made 2 or 3 trips to the seat of government during the recess of legislature to consult with his secretary. So Wyatt didn't make his visit to Alabama until the summer of 1817, and he purchased a home on the Coosa and Alabama rivers. He moved his family over in the winter of 1817 and resided there in a comfortable log cabin that he had purchased. During this time, the Second Creek War had started and was raging across Alabama, and the Creeks were making their way south to join the Seminoles in Florida and connect with them so they would be a larger force and keep their territory. There's a little anecdote about him that was interesting. The governor was returning home from St. Stephen's with his attendant Peter, and they happened to stop off at Fort Dale to eat a snack and graze their horses. And only 2 or 3 families resided in the area at the time, and one family actually resided at the fort. It was very limited in population. Well, the governor and Peter continued their journey on about 1 o'clock that afternoon, and only 2 hours later, a party of hostile Creeks approached Fort Dale and attacked the family residing there. The wife had happened to go off to a neighbor's house for a few minutes, and when she came back, she discovered her husband and 5 children murdered and scalped, and the fort smoldering in ashes. The governor narrowly escaped being part of those murdered. Another time, the governor arrived with his servant Peter by horseback on the eastern bank of the Tombigbee, opposite St. Stephen's, and several travelers were in the company. The ferry boat they were going to get on to cross the Tombigbee was overloaded, and it was old and leaky. When they got halfway across the river, the boat started to sink. Well, it was kind of bad because William couldn't swim, and his servant, Peter, quickly thought of a way to save the governor. Peter had quickly released the governor's horse Dearborn into the river and told his master to sit on the saddle. And Peter swam and led the horse to the bank on the other side, so he saved his life doing that. But sadly, on July 1820, Bibb was thrown from his horse during a violent thunderstorm, and he was injured so badly and suffered such excruciating pain for months. He finally expired at his residence in Autauga County several months later. Calm, collected, and peaceful, surrounded by his family and many of his relatives, he died when he was only 40 years old. So he didn't live very long, but he did a lot of things in his lifetime. He was never known in conversation to utter a single word of vulgarity, and he was really nice to women. He was the essence of a gentleman. At the death of Governor Bibb, the Constitution of the state devolved the office of the President of the Senate for the time being, but finally Thomas Bibb, his brother, he was president of the Senate and became the acting governor for the unexpired term. The brothers and sisters of William Wyatt Bibb were Thomas Bibb, who became governor after William's death, Peyton Bibb, who became a Methodist preacher, John Dandridge Bibb, who was state senator from Montgomery, and that's who wrote the letter about him, Joseph Bibb, who became a skilled physician, and Benahum, I think that's the way you pronounced it, S. Bibb, was born after his father died. He was the judge of the county court in Montgomery for years. And Dolly Bibb married Alexander Pope of Mobile, and Martha Bibb met Fleming Freeman. Mrs. Bibb, in old age, thought she needed another husband, and so she remarried to Colonel William Barnett, a gentleman from Georgia who thought he needed a wife, but their marriage didn't work out too well. They both realized that it wasn't for the best, and they just kind of drifted apart. She was a pretty remarkable woman, She raised all these children, gave them an education, and all in the wilds of Georgia. Well, she came on over to Alabama later in life, but in the wilds of Georgia in the very early days. William Wyatt Bibb selected the land for the seat of government, Cahaba, and that we'll continue that in another story, and another podcast.
Yeah, that is a pretty amazing story. The rough, wild days of early Alabama and the strength of Miss Bibb or Mrs. Bibb and what she all did to raise those children.
Yeah, there's so many stories that we don't know about the women. And it's really sad. A lot of women in those frontier days were left with children just like that. And can you imagine? She had to run the plantation that they lived on, plus raise the children and get enough money to educate them.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Again, happy birthday to the state of Alabama on the December 14th.
Happy birthday to Alabama.
Everyone out there, have a happy holidays, and we'll see you next time. We'll let Red Foley play us out a little Alabama Jubilee. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh,